The wine glass in my hand trembled slightly when Daniel said it, casually, like he was announcing extra dessert. "Oh, by the way," he added while scrolling his phone, "Samantha's joining us for Christmas dinner." The room smelled like cinnamon candles and roasted turkey prep. Snow tapped softly against the kitchen window. I blinked once. "Samantha?" I asked. He smirked without looking up. "My ex." He finally met my eyes, already amused by my reaction. "Don't make a scene," he said calmly. "Behave yourself for once." The words landed heavier than the announcement. Behind him, his mother laughed softly like this was adorable. His sister avoided eye contact, and suddenly I realized something unsettling. Everyone already knew. Everyone except me. I felt heat rise behind my ribs, but my face stayed calm. I nodded. "Of course," I said gently. "Whatever makes you happy." Daniel relaxed immediately, satisfied. He mistook my calm for surrender. But something shifted inside me right then. Because while he planned Christmas dinner, I had already decided to send an invitation of my own. To someone Daniel never imagined would walk through our door. Someone he feared. Someone who could dismantle his carefully curated life in minutes. I smiled and began setting the table. Why would a husband invite his wealthy ex-wife to Christmas? Why did his family treat it like normal tradition? Why did Daniel look relieved instead of nervous? And why did he seem so confident that I wouldn't fight back? Most importantly, why did I suddenly feel like I had been cast as a background character in my own marriage? I didn't argue, I didn't question, I didn't protest. And that confused everyone more than anger ever could. Because silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence means calculation. Before we go further, tell me something in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? I always wonder how many people listening have sat at a holiday table, pretending everything was fine when it absolutely wasn't. If stories about relationships, quiet betrayals, and emotional turning points feel familiar to you, you're in the right place here. Now let me tell you how Christmas dinner turned into the night my marriage changed forever. My name is Alina, I'm 32, and until that December I thought my marriage was stable. Not passionate, not dramatic, just stable. Daniel worked in corporate finance, structured, image-conscious, the kind of man who measured life by appearances. I ran a small interior design consulting business from home. We lived in a polished suburban neighborhood where Christmas lights looked competitive rather than joyful. From the outside, we looked successful. But there was always one invisible presence in our marriage, Samantha, Daniel's ex-wife. She wasn't just an ex. She was the ex, old money, family wealth, connections everywhere. The woman everyone compared me to without saying it directly. At parties I heard, Samantha used to host incredible events. Daniel and Samantha were such a power couple. You're different. Different meant replaceable. I learned early not to react. Daniel always framed it casually. "We stayed friends," he'd say. "It's mature. Mature adults don't get jealous." So I convinced myself it didn't bother me until Christmas. Because inviting an ex to Christmas dinner isn't maturity. It's positioning. And I didn't yet understand why he needed that positioning so badly. 3 days later, Daniel became unusually particular about the house. He inspected decorations, rearranged furniture, critiqued my cooking plan. "Maybe don't make the lasagna," he said. "Samantha prefers lighter food." I paused. "She's a guest. She has refined taste." Refined compared to me. I asked calmly, "What exactly is this dinner supposed to be?" He sighed like I was slow. "A civilized holiday." His mother added from the living room, "Samantha appreciates elegance." I smiled politely. "I'll keep that in mind." But inside, a realization formed. This dinner wasn't about Christmas. It was an audition, and I was unknowingly competing. The next day, Daniel handed me a dress box. "Wear this." Inside was a sleek black dress. Beautiful, expensive, not my style. "It's something Samantha would wear," he added absent-mindedly. The sentence slipped out before he could stop it. He froze. I looked up slowly. "Good to know," internal thought. He isn't comparing us privately anymore. He's doing it openly. Another shift, another data point. I tried something small. "Why is she really coming?" He laughed. "You're overthinking." But his eyes moved away too quickly. And that's when suspicion replaced hurt. That evening, Daniel stepped onto the patio for a call. The sliding door didn't fully close. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard my name. Yes, Daniel said quietly. No, she doesn't know. Pause. It'll be easier after Christmas. Another pause. I just need everything smooth until then. My stomach tightened. Easier for what? He laughed softly. I can handle her. Handle me. Internal thought, I'm not a partner, I'm a situation. When he came back inside, he kissed my forehead like nothing happened. That was the moment curiosity turned into certainty. Something larger was happening, and Samantha's invitation was only the surface. I didn't cry. That surprised even me. Instead, my brain moved into observation mode. Details started lining up. Sudden financial secrecy, increased calls he took outside his family treating me like temporary furniture Samantha, reappearing exactly when Daniel seemed stressed. It felt less like coincidence and more like preparation. I stopped asking questions. I started watching. That night while Daniel slept, I sat at the kitchen island with my laptop open. Snow fell quietly outside. Christmas lights reflected in the window. I opened my contacts list, scrolled past friends, clients, family, then stopped on one name, a name Daniel never mentioned anymore, a name connected to a part of his past he avoided completely. My finger hovered over the screen. If I invite this person, everything changes. I remembered his smirk. Behave yourself for once. I smiled softly. Then I sent the message, Christmas dinner. You should come, he won't expect you. The reply came almost immediately. Are you sure? I typed. Yes, it's time. 3 dots appeared, then, I'll be there. I closed the laptop. For the first time since the announcement, I felt calm, because Daniel thought Christmas would showcase control. He had no idea it would become an exposure. Upstairs, Daniel slept peacefully. Certain he understood the story, certain I would play my role. He had invited the woman who reminded me I was second place. But I had invited someone else. Someone connected to secrets Daniel buried years ago. Someone who didn't fear his image. Someone capable of destroying it. And on Christmas night, when the doorbell rang, Daniel's world would change before dessert was served. Christmas Eve morning felt wrong. Not festive wrong, strategic wrong. Daniel woke earlier than usual, already dressed, already alert. He checked his phone 3 times before finishing coffee. His mother arrived at 9 a.m. carrying expensive decorations I had never seen before. Not sentimental ornaments, display pieces, crystal reindeer, gold napkin rings, white orchids. Oh, Alina, his mother said sweetly, removing my handmade centerpiece. This looks cozy. But Samantha prefers something more refined. She replaced it without asking. Daniel didn't object. He adjusted the orchids instead. They're preparing the house for her. I asked casually, are we hosting Christmas or staging a photo shoot? Daniel chuckled. You're reading into things again. His sister Megan added, Samantha just appreciates presentation. Presentation, image, performance, I nodded. Of course. And kept watching. By noon, I realized something unsettling. Nothing in the house reflected me anymore. The music playlist, Samantha's favorite jazz artist, the wine selection. Daniel mentioned she loved French reds. Even dessert changed. I already ordered pastries, Daniel said. I baked all morning, he shrugged. This just feels more appropriate. Internal thought, I live here, but tonight I'm a guest. I smiled politely. Whatever makes everyone comfortable. He relaxed instantly. That reaction told me everything. Daniel expected resistance, and my calm made him careless. There's a moment in a relationship when hurt transforms into observation. You stop asking, why is he doing this to me? And start asking, what does he need from this situation? Because people rarely behave cruelly without purpose. Daniel wasn't nostalgic. He was positioning himself, and I still didn't know why. Around 2 p.m., Daniel left his phone charging in the kitchen. He never did that. A notification appeared. Samantha, looking forward to tonight. Everything still on schedule, not looking forward to dinner, on schedule. My chest tightened. Another message followed. After tonight, things should finally be resolved. Resolved. Internal thought, resolved for whom? I didn't open the conversation. I didn't need to. The tone told me enough. This dinner wasn't social. It was transactional. At 5 p.m., Samantha arrived. She walked in like she belonged. Elegant coat, perfect smile, confidence without hesitation. She hugged Daniel first, longer than necessary. "Daniel," she said warmly, "you look good." "You too," he replied, voice softer than usual. Then she turned to me. "Elena, finally." Her smile was polite but assessing, like someone evaluating a replacement item. "Thank you for hosting," she said. "You're welcome," I replied calmly. She looked around the house approvingly. "It feels familiar." Internal thought, because they made it familiar for you. His mother rushed over. "We missed you last Christmas." "Missed you." "Not nice to see you." "Missed you." I poured wine quietly. Watching. Learning. Within minutes, Samantha subtly assumed authority. She adjusted seating arrangements, suggested serving order, even corrected Daniel's tie. No one questioned it. Not even Daniel. Samantha laughed lightly. "Remember how we used to host 12-course Christmas dinners?" His mother beamed. "Oh, those were unforgettable." Daniel glanced at me. "Elena prefers simpler things." The sentence sounded harmless, but it positioned me, less sophisticated, temporary. Internal thought, they are rewriting history while I stand here. I smiled. "I value comfort," Samantha nodded. "Yes, everyone has their strengths." The compliment wasn't a compliment. It was classification. At first I felt embarrassed, then curious, then something sharper, because Samantha wasn't acting like an ex revisiting memories. She was acting like someone returning to unfinished business. And Daniel looked nervous. Not nostalgic, nervous. That changed everything. Dinner began beautifully. Candles flickered. Snow fell outside. Anyone walking past our house would see a perfect Christmas scene. Inside, tension moved quietly beneath conversation. Samantha sipped wine. "So, Daniel, have you finalized everything?" He hesitated. "Almost." His father leaned forward. "We're excited about the transition." Transition. My fork paused. "What transition?" I asked calmly. Daniel smiled too quickly. "Work stuff." Samantha watched me carefully. "You'll understand soon." Internal thought, they're all in on something. I looked around the table. Everyone knew something, except me. Suddenly memories aligned. Daniel pushing me to quit expanding my business. Encouraging joint financial decisions lately. Asking detailed questions about property ownership. Requesting access to accounts he previously ignored. A cold understanding formed. This dinner wasn't emotional, it was strategic timing. And Samantha wasn't visiting. She was part of a plan. I found Daniel alone in the hallway. "What's happening tonight?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "Why can't you just relax?" "Because I feel like I'm missing context." "You always overanalyze." Internal thought, deflection. "Is Samantha here for business?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "It's complicated." "Then explain." He lowered his voice. "Please don't make this difficult." There it was again, not reassurance, control. I realized then Daniel didn't fear conflict. He feared disruption. He needed tonight to proceed smoothly, which meant whatever I had invited into this house would arrive at the worst possible moment for him. And suddenly I felt certain I had chosen correctly. Back at the table, Samantha spoke openly. "I've always believed Daniel deserved stability." His mother nodded enthusiastically. "He thrives with the right partner." Partner, present tense. I took a slow sip of wine. "And what role do I play?" I asked gently. Samantha smiled calmly. "You helped him transition." The word hit harder than insult. Transition. Internal thought, I was never meant to stay. Everything snapped into focus. Daniel wasn't reconnecting emotionally. He was preparing a return. Financially, socially, legally. Samantha represented security, status, and wealth. And tonight, they intended to reposition him back into her world. My presence wasn't partnership. It was inconvenience awaiting removal. The humiliation wasn't accidental. It was preparation. I felt strangely peaceful. Because while they believed I was discovering the truth tonight, I had already acted. Hours earlier. An invitation sent. Accepted. On its way. I glanced toward the front door. Snow continued falling. Time moving closer. Dessert plates arrived. Laughter grew louder. Daniel visibly relaxed. He thought the evening was succeeding. Samantha leaned back confidently. His parents exchanged satisfied looks. Everyone believed the night belonged to them. Then the doorbell rang, one clear sound. Daniel frowned. "We're not expecting anyone." I stood slowly. "I am." His smile faltered. "What?" I walked toward the door calmly. Behind me chairs shifted. Confusion spread. Samantha watched sharply. Daniel followed, nervous now. The hallway felt impossibly quiet as I reached the handle. Internal thought. "You told me to behave." I opened the door. Daniel stepped beside me and the color drained from his face instantly. Daniel stopped breathing, not metaphorically, actually stopped. His hand tightened around the hallway wall like he needed support. Standing on our doorstep was a man in a dark winter coat, snow dusting his shoulders, calm eyes scanning the room behind me. He smiled gently at me first. "Thank you for inviting me, Alina." Then he looked past me, at Daniel, and Daniel whispered, "No!" The color drained from his face so fast it almost frightened me. Behind us, Samantha stood up from the dining table. His parents leaned forward. Confusion rippled through the house. I stepped aside. "Please come in." The man walked inside slowly, controlled, unhurried, like someone who already understood the impact of his presence. Daniel finally spoke. Voice thin, "What are you doing here?" The man removed his gloves calmly. "You invited guests," he said. "I assumed I could accept one too." His tone wasn't aggressive. That made it worse, because Daniel wasn't afraid of anger. He was afraid of authority. Dialogue, recognition. Samantha stared hard. "Michael!" So that was the first reveal. His name landed like a dropped glass. Michael. Daniel's posture collapsed slightly. His father stood up abruptly. "This is inappropriate." Michael smiled politely. "I agree, many things tonight appear inappropriate." Internal thought, good, let them feel confusion. Daniel turned to me sharply. "You had no right." I met his eyes calmly. "You told me not to make a scene." Who Michael wasn't a random guest. He wasn't a friend. He wasn't family. He was Daniel's former business partner, the man Daniel never mentioned anymore. The man connected to a company Daniel had left suddenly 3 years earlier. The man whose name disappeared from conversations whenever finances came up. And judging by Daniel's reaction, the man he hoped never to face again. Daniel tried to recover composure. "This isn't the time," he said quietly. Michael glanced toward the dining table. "It seems like the perfect time." Samantha's expression hardened. She understood something faster than the others. Her confidence faded slightly. "What is this about?" she asked. Michael looked directly at her. "You weren't informed," Daniel snapped. "We're not discussing business tonight." Michael replied calmly. "You already are." Internal thought. The roles just shifted. A few minutes earlier, I had been the outsider. Now everyone watched Michael. Daniel moved subtly between him and Samantha, protective, defensive, fearful. That reaction confirmed what I suspected after overhearing the phone call. This dinner was never about nostalgia. It was negotiation. And Michael was the one person capable of destroying it. I guided everyone back toward the dining room. Calmly hosting, maintaining composure, because chaos benefits the guilty. Structure exposes them. Michael sat across from Daniel. Perfect symmetry. Snow fell harder outside. Candles flickered. Christmas music continued playing softly, absurdly cheerful against rising tension. Michael folded his hands. "I received a notification this morning," he said calmly. "A financial restructuring involving Daniel's assets." Daniel's mother frowned. "What restructuring?" Samantha's eyes narrowed. Daniel interrupted quickly. "It's nothing finalized." Michael continued anyway. "Interesting wording." He looked toward Samantha. "You're funding the acquisition, correct?" The room froze. Samantha didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said everything. My chest tightened. Acquisition, funding. I watched Daniel carefully. He wouldn't look at me. Internal thought, this isn't emotional betrayal. This is financial betrayal. And suddenly every strange behavior made sense. Michael turned to me gently. "Alina, were you aware your home equity was listed in Daniel's restructuring proposal?" The sentence landed like thunder. I blinked. "My, what?" Daniel stood up immediately. "That's confidential." Michael remained calm. Not when another party is unknowingly involved. I felt the room tilt slightly. Daniel, I said quietly, what is he talking about? He avoided my eyes. It's temporary leverage. My stomach dropped. Leverage, meaning collateral. Meaning me, you used our home, I asked. It's standard practice. Without telling me, you would have worried unnecessarily. Internal thought, he didn't hide this to protect me. He hid it because I would have said no. Samantha spoke carefully now. Daniel assured me everything was legally secure. Michael nodded slightly. That depends on whether Alina consented. All eyes turned toward me. And for the first time that night, I wasn't background decoration. I was central. Daniel's plan was suddenly visible. He intended to reconnect with Samantha financially, secure investment through her wealth, use marital assets, including mine, to stabilize his failing business transition. And once completed, I would become unnecessary. The transition Samantha mentioned earlier echoed loudly now. Daniel's father spoke sternly. This is a private marital matter, Michael replied calmly. It stopped being private when signatures were prepared. My pulse slowed. Signatures? I asked. Michael looked at Daniel. You didn't tell her. Daniel's voice sharpened. This is manipulation. Michael slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, highlighted sections, my name printed repeatedly, authorization lines, blank, waiting. You plan to have me sign this? I asked. Daniel rubbed his temples. It's just paperwork. For transferring liability, it's temporary, Samantha finally spoke. You said Alina supported this. Silence. Daniel didn't answer. Internal thought, he lied to both of us. And suddenly, Samantha wasn't an enemy. She was another participant misled by the same man. His mother stood up. This is being blown out of proportion. Daniel nodded quickly. Yes. Michael has always resented me. Michael smiled faintly. I don't resent you, I audit risk. The word audit landed precisely. I almost laughed at the irony, because tonight had turned into an audit of my marriage. I realized something important in that moment. Daniel never expected resistance. Not from me, not from Samantha. He relied on silence, compliance, image preservation. He believed women would prioritize harmony over truth. And that belief had worked for him for years, until tonight. Samantha leaned forward slowly. Daniel, is any of this inaccurate? He hesitated. That hesitation ended everything. Her posture changed instantly. Cold, professional. Investor, not ex-wife. You told me Alina understood the restructuring. Daniel said nothing. Samantha pushed her chair back slightly. I do not invest in deception. Internal thought, the alliance just fractured. Daniel turned toward me desperately. Alina, you're letting him manipulate you, I answered calmly. I invited clarity. His voice rose. You're ruining Christmas. I met his eyes evenly. No. Truth arrived for Christmas. Michael remained silent, allowing the realization to settle. That restraint made the moment heavier than any shouting could. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. You always do this. You create problems. The accusation hung in the air. His family nodded reflexively. The familiar pattern. Make me the disruption, make me emotional, make me unreasonable. But something had changed. I didn't react emotionally. I simply asked, when were you planning to tell me? He had no answer, and everyone noticed. Snow fell harder outside. Dinner sat untouched. Samantha stared at documents. Michael waited calmly. Daniel's parents whispered anxiously. And I realized the most dangerous part of the evening hadn't happened yet. Because Daniel still believed he could regain control. He didn't know the exposure had only begun. And what happened next would completely dismantle the life he built on secrecy. No one touched their food anymore. Candles burned lower. Christmas music kept playing softly in the background, absurdly cheerful compared to the tension sitting at the table. Daniel stood frozen, eyes moving between Michael, Samantha, and me. He looked less angry now, more desperate, because the problem wasn't just that truth appeared. The problem was that witnesses existed, and Daniel's life depended on perception. He turned toward Samantha quickly. This is exactly why I didn't want him involved, Daniel said. Michael has always tried to sabotage me. His tone shifted smoothly, confident, persuasive. I recognized it instantly. Damage control mode. Michael raised an eyebrow. Sabotage, Daniel nodded firmly. You're angry I left the company. Michael replied calmly. You didn't leave. You transferred liability. His mother interrupted sharply. This is ancient history. Daniel seized that opening. Yes, old disputes. Alina invited him just to embarrass me. All eyes turned toward me. Internal thought. Here it comes, the familiar role assignment. The difficult wife, the emotional disruptor. Daniel faced Samantha directly. You know how sensitive Alina can be. Sensitive. The word was deliberate. He continued. She misunderstood financial discussions and escalated things. His father nodded. Alina has always struggled with business complexity. His sister added softly. She worries too much. Three voices reinforcing one narrative. Gaslighting works best when delivered collectively. Daniel looked at me. You invited Michael because you were jealous I stayed friends with Samantha. The room waited for my reaction. Anger, tears, defensiveness. Anything emotional would validate his story. Internal thought, he still thinks emotion equals weakness. I folded my hands calmly. No, just one word, and silence expanded. Samantha leaned back slowly. Her expression changed from defensive to analytical. She wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. She was evaluating risk. Daniel, she said carefully, did you list Alina's assets without confirmed consent? He exhaled sharply. It was procedural. That's not an answer. It would have benefited all of us. Michael added quietly, except the uninformed party. Daniel snapped. You're twisting everything. But the confidence in his voice had cracks now. I realized something important. Daniel wasn't panicking because of me. He was panicking because Samantha's perception mattered more. Her approval meant funding. Status. Recovery. And tonight, that approval was slipping away. His mother stood up abruptly. This is humiliating, she said. She pointed at me. You should be ashamed for ruining Christmas. His father added, you could have discussed this privately instead of attacking your husband. Attack. They reframed exposure as aggression. Classic reversal. I nodded slowly. You invited an ex to Christmas without telling me why. That's different, his mother snapped. How? Silence. Because the answer exposed hierarchy. Samantha mattered. I didn't. Daniel softened his voice. Alina, we can talk about this later. Later meant quietly. Later meant without witnesses. Later meant control restored. I shook my head gently. No, tonight works. His jaw tightened. You're being unreasonable. Internal thought. Translation. You're not cooperating. Michael finally spoke again. Perhaps clarity would help. He turned toward Samantha. Daniel's previous venture accumulated significant losses before he exited. Daniel slammed his hand down. Enough, Michael continued anyway. To secure new investment, he needed credibility. Samantha's eyes narrowed. And I provided that. Michael nodded. Yes, but additional collateral strengthened the proposal. He looked at me. Marital assets. The room went still. Understanding spread visibly. It wasn't about love, not nostalgia, not reconciliation. Daniel invited Samantha to Christmas to rebuild financial status. And I was part of the package he intended to trade. A stabilizing spouse until replacement security arrived. Internal thought, I wasn't competing with an ex. I was being phased out. Daniel turned sharply toward everyone. You see what she's doing, he said loudly. She waited for Christmas to humiliate me. His sister nodded. She always picks dramatic moments. His mother added, she never appreciated what Daniel provided. The accusations came quickly now. Reputation defense. If truth cannot be denied, discredit the messenger. Daniel faced Samantha. She's been unhappy for months. I raised an eyebrow. That's new information. He ignored me. She wants out of the marriage and needed an excuse. Gasps. A bold pivot. Internal thought, he's rewriting reality in real time. I spoke quietly. If I wanted to leave, I would leave. Daniel laughed nervously. Exactly. Emotional decisions. I held his gaze. This isn't emotional. Silence returned. Michael watched carefully. Samantha studied me now with new respect, because calm certainty is harder to dismiss than anger. Samantha folded the documents slowly. Daniel, she said, voice cool, you told me Alina fully supported restructuring. He swallowed. She would have. That's not consent. Her tone carried finality, investor language. Not ex-wife language. His parents noticed immediately. Panic flickered across their faces. Daniel turned toward me desperately. You're destroying everything we worked for, I answered gently. You built this without me. His voice rose. I did this for us. For us, I repeated softly, without informing me. He had no response, and that silence carried more weight than accusation ever could. Daniel stepped closer. Lower voice, threatening calm. If you continue this, you'll regret it. The room froze. His mask slipped. Samantha noticed. Michael noticed. Everyone noticed. Internal thought, now they see who he becomes when control disappears. I didn't step back. I simply said, I already regret trusting you. Snow battered the windows. Dinner sat untouched. Christmas lights blinked softly around us. Daniel stood isolated in the center of the room, family loyalty weakening, financial support uncertain, image collapsing. And he still didn't realize the real exposure hadn't happened yet, because one final truth remained. The reason Michael truly frightened him, and why I chose him to walk through that door. No one moved. Even the Christmas tree lights felt too bright now, reflecting off untouched plates and half-filled wine glasses. Daniel stood in the center of the dining room like a man trying to calculate 10 outcomes at once, and failing. Because he still believed this was an argument. It wasn't. It was an audit, and audits don't stop when someone feels uncomfortable. Michael slowly placed his napkin on the table. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Daniel with the calm patience of someone who had waited years for truth to arrive naturally. Daniel, he said, we should probably address the remaining issue. Daniel's face drained. There is no remaining issue. His mother quickly added, yes, this has gone far enough. His father nodded. Everyone has misunderstandings during marriage. They were trying to close the moment, seal the narrative, restore normalcy. But Samantha spoke before they could. I'd like to hear it. That changed everything. Daniel turned toward her quickly. Samantha, this isn't relevant. She crossed her arms. If my investment decisions are connected to your personal disclosures, it's extremely relevant. Her voice had shifted fully into executive tone. Not ex-girlfriend, not guest, authority. Daniel looked at me. For the first time that night, there was no anger in his eyes, only fear. Real fear. Internal thought, he finally understands why Michael is here. Michael leaned slightly forward. Before Alina and Daniel married, he began, Daniel approached our firm seeking recovery financing. Daniel interrupted immediately. That was years ago. Michael nodded calmly. Yes, and you were denied. Samantha frowned. Why? Silence stretched. Daniel shook his head. We're not discussing this. Michael continued anyway. Because Daniel failed to disclose existing personal liabilities connected to a prior relationship settlement. The words landed softly, but heavily. Samantha blinked. What settlement? Daniel laughed suddenly, a forced laugh. This is ridiculous. He looked around the room. Michael has always hated me. His mother added quickly. This is character assassination. His sister chimed in. He's jealous of Daniel's success. The coordinated defense activated instantly. Attack credibility. Avoid facts. Samantha's eyes narrowed. Daniel, did you have undisclosed financial obligations? No. Michael calmly slid another document forward. Court-filed mediation record. Daniel's hand slammed onto the table. You had no right to bring that here. Michael met his gaze. You invited me when you structured financial proposals tied to marital stability. The room inhaled collectively. Internal thought, now we're here. Michael spoke gently. Daniel entered a confidential settlement after misrepresenting joint investment funds during his prior engagement. Samantha stared at Daniel. You told me your previous business collapse was market-related. Daniel's voice sharpened. It was, Michael replied. Partially, the remainder involved breach of fiduciary disclosure. Translation. He had hidden financial risks before, exactly as he attempted to do again. Suddenly past conversations rearranged themselves for everyone at the table. Daniel's urgency, his obsession with optics, His constant need for validation from powerful people. His careful image management. It wasn't ambition. It was survival. Samantha stood slowly. You invited me here knowing this history existed. Daniel stepped toward her. I was going to explain. When? His silence answered. She turned toward me. Alina, did you know any of this? I shook my head calmly. No. And the room finally understood. I wasn't orchestrating chaos. I had been excluded from truth entirely. Cornered people rarely confess. They escalate. Daniel's tone hardened. Fine, he said. Yes, there was a settlement, but it was exaggerated. His father nodded vigorously. Business disputes happen all the time. His mother added. People are attacking Daniel because he's successful. Daniel turned toward me again. You're weaponizing private history because you're insecure. There it was. The last strategy. Make me unstable. Invalidate the witness. My calm reply, I spoke softly. I didn't expose anything. I gestured toward Michael. You did that yourself when you built another plan on silence. Daniel scoffed. You're pretending to be innocent. Internal thought. He still believes volume equals authority. Samantha suddenly asked, Alina, why invite Michael specifically? The question hung heavily. I answered honestly. Because Daniel respects power. Daniel snapped. That's manipulative. I met his eyes. No, it's accurate. Silence confirmed it. Everyone knew he behaved differently around people who could affect his status. Michael wasn't revenge. Michael was accountability Daniel couldn't charm. I stood slowly, not dramatically, just calmly. I didn't send an invitation to hurt anyone, I said. I sent one so I wouldn't be the only person hearing explanations. His mother shook her head. You embarrassed your husband. I answered quietly. No, truth embarrassed him. His sister stood up. You could have supported him privately. His father added, marriage means loyalty. Daniel seized momentum. Yes. Instead you betrayed me in front of everyone. Internal thought. Interesting. They still framed honesty as betrayal. Dialogue sequence. The turning point, I asked gently. When Daniel invited Samantha without telling me, was that loyalty? No one answered. When he prepared financial plans using shared assets without discussion, was that loyalty? Silence deepened. When I asked questions and was told to behave myself, was that respect? His mother looked away. Because everyone remembered the words. Daniel's voice cracked. You're destroying our marriage. I nodded slowly. No. I stopped protecting a version of it that only existed for you. His breathing grew uneven. He looked around for allies. None stepped forward now. Even his parents stayed quiet. Because denial works only until evidence reshapes perception. Samantha exhaled. Daniel, I can't continue any financial involvement under these circumstances. His face went pale. You're overreacting. No, she said calmly. I'm correcting an assessment. One sentence. Years of ambition dissolved. Daniel looked smaller suddenly. Not physically, socially. The room no longer revolved around him. And for the first time since our marriage began, I wasn't reacting to his emotions. He was reacting to mine. Or rather, to my lack of reaction. He turned toward me one last time. You planned this from the beginning. I answered honestly. No, pause. I planned to stop being invisible. And that sentence ended the argument, because no one could argue with a boundary. Chairs scraped softly. People avoided eye contact. His parents gathered coats quickly. No holiday hugs, no forced smiles, just quiet withdrawal. The kind that happens when a shared illusion collapses. Samantha approached me near the door. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? For believing I understood the situation. I nodded. We all did. She left without looking at Daniel. Michael lingered briefly. You handled this well, he said. I didn't handle anything, I replied. I just stopped pretending. He smiled slightly. That's usually enough. And then he was gone too. The house felt enormous suddenly. Christmas music still playing, tree lights blinking softly. Daniel stood across the room, anger gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, uncertainty. You ruined everything, he whispered. I shook my head gently. No, I stopped helping you hide it. He looked exhausted. What happens now? Internal thought. For the first time, he doesn't control the answer. I said quietly, Now we tell the truth about who we actually are." He didn't argue, because deep down he already knew. The front door clicked shut and didn't feel like an ending. It felt like pressure releasing. Not relief exactly, more like the kind of silence that arrives after something irreversible has already happened. Daniel didn't move for a while. Neither did I. The Christmas lights kept blinking across the room like nothing had changed, but everything had. He finally sat down at the dining table again, slowly, like his body had run out of instructions. I stayed standing. Not because I was trying to be strong, because sitting would have made it feel like we were going back to normal. And nothing about this was normal anymore. Daniel spoke without looking up. "What do you want now?" It wasn't defensive this time. It was empty. Internal thought, that question only comes after control is gone. I took a breath. "I want honesty that doesn't depend on whether it benefits you." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "That's not realistic." I nodded slightly. "That answer is why we're here." Silence again. This one longer, less chaotic, more final. There's a strange moment after exposure where people expect another explosion, another argument, another reversal, but what actually happens is slower, heavier. Daniel got up and walked to the kitchen without speaking. I heard him open a cabinet, then close it. No glass clinking, no water pouring, just movement without purpose. He returned and leaned against the doorway. "You humiliated me in front of everyone," he said again, quieter now. I looked at him. "No," I said. "I stopped protecting an illusion that was already collapsing." That sentence landed differently this time, because there was no audience left to validate his version. He finally asked the question he had been avoiding. "Was any of it ever going to work?" I didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't betrayal in one moment. It was erosion, small decisions, hidden finances, edited conversations, partial truths, and silence that slowly replaced partnership. Finally, I said, "It might have if I had been included in the decisions that affected me." That was the difference. Not love, not emotion. Inclusion. Daniel sat down again, this time slower, less performative. "You really believe I was using you," he said. I shook my head. "No," pause. "I believe you were using control to avoid uncertainty." He frowned. "That's the same thing." "No," I said, "it isn't." And that distinction mattered more than anything else tonight, because intention and impact were finally being separated. Daniel didn't respond immediately. That was new. Usually he filled silence with justification. This time he just stared at the table. Then quietly, "I didn't think you'd react like this." Internal thought, that's the core issue. He wasn't surprised by the behavior. He was surprised by the boundary. "I thought we were stable," he said. I nodded slowly. "So did I," a pause. "But stability built on omission isn't stability," I added. He looked up at me. For a moment, something softer appeared. Not manipulation, not strategy, confusion. "You always understood everything," he said quietly. That line almost sounded like admiration. But it wasn't. It was dependency. I walked to the hallway, not rushed, not emotional, just deliberate. Daniel followed a few steps behind. "What are you doing?" he asked. I took my coat from the hook. "I'm not continuing a marriage where information is optional depending on who benefits." He stood still. "You're leaving?" I paused. "That depends on whether you think honesty is still negotiable." He didn't answer. And that silence answered for him. The cold air outside hit differently. Not painful. Clear. The street was quiet. Snow settling on everything evenly, like the world was pretending nothing had happened inside that house. I stood there for a moment before walking down the steps. No dramatic exit. No collapse, just movement forward. Internal thought, this is what ending looks like when it's not emotional anymore. It's quiet. The aftermath didn't explode publicly the way people imagine. It unraveled. Slowly, professionally. Financial reviews were completed, documents reviewed, agreements paused, nothing theatrical, just systems correcting themselves. Daniel's family stopped calling as often, not out of anger, out of avoidance. Samantha never returned to the conversation. Michael sent a single message. Stability is built after truth, not before it. I kept that message. Not because it was profound, because it was simple. There's a strange emptiness after a long emotional storm ends. Not sadness, not relief, just space. I used it differently, rebuilt routines. Work expanded again. I stopped explaining decisions that didn't require permission. And slowly, something returned that I hadn't noticed I lost. Silence without tension. We spoke once after that, briefly. Not reconciliation, not conflict. Just closure forming itself naturally. I didn't know where the line was, he said. I replied. There was always a line, you just didn't need to see it before. He nodded slowly. I see it now. That was all. No apology that fixed everything. No dramatic regret. Just recognition. People like to think betrayal is a moment. It isn't. It's a pattern where one person keeps adjusting reality to avoid discomfort, and the other person keeps shrinking to maintain peace. Until one day, the shrinking stops, and everything else becomes visible. That's what happened at Christmas. Not revenge. Not revenge dressed as justice. Just visibility. Healing ending months later, I was sitting alone one evening with coffee, watching snow again. The same season. Different weight. No tension in the air anymore. No hidden conversations under polite smiles, just life continuing. I thought about that night briefly, not with anger, not with sadness. More like looking at an old photograph you don't feel attached to anymore. Internal thought, I didn't destroy anything. I stopped participating in something that was already breaking, and that made all the difference. So I've been thinking about this a lot differently now. Because people always ask the same question after something like this. Who was actually wrong? Was it the person who hid things to maintain control? Was it the person who stayed quiet too long? Or was it just a situation where everyone kept adjusting truth until it became unrecognizable? And I wonder, if you were sitting at that table and everything finally came out in the open like that, would you have spoken sooner? Would you have stayed longer? Or would you have done exactly what I did, waited until silence stopped being protection? What would you have done in my place? Lastly, if you liked TH Story, do not leave before subscribing the channel. Thanks for watching, folks.